Let's see what happens when the wizard talks about a magician. I want to give a special shout out to my new top tier Wizard Master patron, Reading Rainbow. Hey everyone, welcome back to Andrew's Wizardly Reads. And today I have got a series review for you. But before we get into that series, make sure you're liking and subscribing, hitting that bell notification so you can get regular updates for when I put out new content. I post every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Also, make sure you're checking that description box down below for the link to the Wizardly Duo Discord, as well as information about my Patreon and links to all of my social media. And that said, guys, we are going to talk today about the Riftwar Saga, which is the start of the Riftwar cycle, which is like 32 something books. It's ridiculous. I don't know if I'm gonna commit to reading all of that, but I definitely enjoyed my experience here. What we're gonna talk about is we're gonna talk about some characters, we're gonna talk about the world building, we're gonna talk about some of the pacing, and we're gonna talk about if I think it's held up. Overall, though, I did really enjoy this. First, let's talk about some world building. In this world, what's really interesting about the Riftwar cycle is it's kind of in the name. This is a portal fantasy. Now, what's cool about that portal fantasy is usually a portal fantasy is real world portaling into a fantasy world. Instead, what we've got is fantasy world portaling into another fantasy world, and those two worlds going to war. Essentially, we have got the world of Midkemia, going to world with the Serani who live in Kelowon. And basically in Kelowon, this world is very bereft of a lot of the natural resources that we, or a general world, would take for granted. They don't have access to any metals, so all of their armor, all of their weapons and things of that nature are made of organic materials that can mimic metal and are almost as good, but they are kind of hunting other worlds and other realms, trying to steal these natural resources. And something that they do have is a lot of magicians. And so basically they use these magics to open up a portal so that they can go steal natural resources. And that's kind of the base premise here of what's going on here. But there's just so much more. There is a lot of jockeying for position within the royal line, which we are not going to cover because it gets messy. It's very confusing. But with Midkemia, we are in I believe it's the Kingdom of Rolanon, which starts out with King Roderick. And he has a bunch of dukes. And where we start is in the Dukedom of Cryde, I believe, with Lord Boric. Where then we've got two stable boys, or two orphan boys, or two peasant boys, Pug and Thomas. We'll talk about them a lot more in a second. But overall, I mentioned magic, and of course, the first book is named Magician. And that's because it's very soft magic system. If you are not a fan of soft magic systems, look away now. This is very soft, to the point where, once characters start coming into their magic, they can just start doing magic. And it's never really abused. A lot of it's emotion-based, or when they're still trying to figure out their magic, it can be triggered in a emotional response. So it's kind of like a save my life type of thing, or things of that nature. But it's never oh, I can magic a goblet out of the air, or I'm going to strike you dead. It's a lot of the times people are oh, I bet you this character could do this if they set their mind to it. And that's probably true. So this is a soft magic system series. Very soft. But basically, we start out with Pug and Thomas. And they're just these two orphan boys who have dreams and aspirations of, becoming warriors or things of that nature. And it all starts out with becoming apprentices. And essentially, they all want to, get into a good job so that they can further their lives. I mean, who doesn't want to? And basically, Pug, nobody wants Pug. And that's because he's just kind of clumsy and aimless and things of that nature. And he stumbles across the magician Colgan one day and naturally uses some magic. So he becomes the magician's apprentice. And what's interesting about that is the first book is actually named Magician's Apprentice. I know this says magician. This is the UK bind-up. from I believe 1990. This is the author's preferred text, which is pretty much the only one you can buy anymore. And yeah, like this is a bind up of the book 1 and book 2. It even like splits. I don't have it like tabbed, but it splits it up between a Magician's Apprentice and Magician's Master, which is books 1 and 2. Then goes into Silverthorn and A Darkness at Sethanon. But basically, Pug gets pulled up and is made the Magician's Apprentice, while Thomas goes and starts training to be a warrior. And, then they just start growing up, and the war that I mentioned earlier takes place, and they have to go to war. There's, of course, other things that go on, like Pug becomes a squire, mainly because he is riding with the Princess Carline, and there's, some like childhood romance going on there. He saves her life, gets promoted to squire, which happens all over the place within this series. A lot of people just were like, hey, you did a good thing. I'm going to make you a squire. It's like, yeah, all right, like, sure. And then there's like different levels of squire. There's like senior squire. Like I said, royal jockeying all over the place. But anyway, we also follow Lord Boric's sons, Arutha and Liam. And Liam is the oldest son, and Arutha, I believe, is the second son. So we follow them a lot further within the second book, which is Magician's Master. We focus in heavily on Arutha within Silverthorn and A Darkness called Sethanon. What's really, really interesting about the structure of these books is because the majority of the Riftwar is resolved here. However, there is a greater overarching thing that is kind of handled by a character called Macross the Black. And he is an ancient magician who is absolutely immortal. And basically he has the gift of foresight. And so he helps steer characters into the fate that they have coming to them. Or, if he needs to save a world, he knows how to manipulate events in order to make a certain thing happen. And so he is kind of a through character, kind of driving the plot a little bit and moving people into position. Additionally, kind of a historical thing in this world is the Valoru, or the Dragon Lords, is basically what they kind of shake out to becoming. And the Valoru are like in ancient times, like thousands and thousands of years ago. They of course, Dragon Lords in the name. They had dragons, and they ruled all the people. Like they used the elves as slaves and things of that nature. By the way, we have slaves. Well, we do have slaves, but by the way, we have slaves, dwarves, and elves within this series. So yes, I mean, that's all factual. I haven't lied. And we've also got like dark elves that go by a kind of a weird name. But through all of that, like, we're also dealing with the repercussions of that history and those legacies and everything that goes into there. I don't really want to go into spoilers because this is a non-spoiler discussion on the series as a whole. We've also got a very special character that appears within this and then becomes a POV in these two books, Silverthorn and Darkness at Sethanon, which, I mean, I've got these out of order. It doesn't really matter, but my OCD demands that I put them in order while I'm holding them up to the camera. And that's Jimmy the Hand. Jimmy the Hand is a master thief from the Mockers Guild within Krondor, I believe, is where he's located. I could have that wrong. That is entirely possible. But basically, he assists Arutha in this book, and then later, through other circumstances, becomes a main POV in these two books. And Jimmy's just fantastic. Again, things just happen for Jimmy. He's usually like nick of time, in the right place, or like, he's just shy of being like Mr. Perfect. So he's very, very clever. He figures things out really, really quickly. A lot of the times he does hold that back from the reader though. And he's like, no, just see. Nah, you'll see. And he'll be doing that by communicating to another character. It's like, I figured it out. And then like he won't reveal it until, wazah, you've got the reveal. So that's kind of cool. Overall, the pacing and the structure is kind of interesting. Now, what I find interesting is the series starts with a book called Magician, with Magician's Master and Magician's Apprentice. And that would make you think that the main characters of this series are Pug and Thomas. And I don't think that's the case. I think they are definitely major players, and they do have massive impacts on the plot as a whole. But the royal line of Arutha and just all of the dukes and the lords and Guy and Roderick, and that has a huge through line going on with Jimmy the Hand, and like the machinations going on within Midkemia are very, very important. And so, I mean, there's times where you can go hundreds of pages without having a Pug or a Thomas chapter. And that's fine because all of the other characters are just as equally interesting. Now, let's talk about my one main criticism about the series and why I love this, but I don't think it's aged well, but I still think it kind of holds up. And that is the treatment of the female characters. Specifically, like, Carline's the only one I can even remember. And that's because she's a princess and very heavily featured in the first book. I know, like, Arutha's got a wife. I know a lot of the times the way women are treated within this particular quartet is they are something to be obtained. They are something to be slept with. They are very much secondary background characters. Like, even Pug at times. Like, I initially liked the relationship that was budding between Pug and Carline. And then, like, just that kind of goes off the rail. And Carline starts to become a strong female character, and then she just disappears from the narrative. Just kind of fades into the background. And I'm not saying that they're, like, meek and subservient. Like, they are assertive, but there's never, like, you know, this is very much the men are going to action. The men are going to war, while the women stay home and take care of the kids. We don't really have... we don't have any female POVs within this story. And so I think that might bug some readers. And for that reason, like, I think it hasn't aged super well, but it does hold up because it is a fun and engaging fantasy story. That said, if I had to rank or give a star rating, enjoyment, I would give this a 5 out of 5. In terms of how good it is, I would give it a 4 out of 5. I think that this holds up very, very well, and I am very strong in my recommendation of it. I just do think that I wish it had aged a little bit better. That said, guys, that is the end of this review, so please let me know in the comments down below. Have you read this? Do you plan on picking it up? Do you even want to try it? Please let me know. That said, guys, that's all I've got for you. So, till next time, peace out, stay magical, bye. And as always, I want to give a huge thank you to my patrons.